Welcome to the Write Good Books podcast, the audio companion to WriteGoodBooks.com, with your host Jason Bougger.
And we are back at the podcast. I'm Jason, and I'm joined by our co-host Scott Michael Childers. How are you doing this fine day?
I am doing as fine as the day is fine.
Awesome.
I guess.
Awesome. And to you listeners, hola, y'all. We drove to Texas. So for 14 hours, my 3-year-old watched Dora the Explorer DVDs in the car.
I'm so sorry.
It was just awesome. We were going to do a horror one. That's why I brought that up. Instead, we're going to talk on a different topic today. Now, today, we were having a little discussion before we started recording, because I've been planning a presentation for a conference that's a little out of my normal presentation. I've done a lot of panels on writing at genre conventions, and this is a presentation for mostly non-writers on the Writers Guild I'm a member of. So Scott and I were kind of exchanging some stories about being on panels and giving presentations to different types of audiences, and we both had a couple of funny stories to share. I thought maybe it'll help y'all. So like I said, I've been on a bunch of panels talking about writing and about genres and stuff. What kind of stuff have you done?
Well, I built a bit of a reputation presenting.
A good one, I hope?
Yes.
Okay.
Talking to librarians about technical issues and such. And now I've kind of geared towards more legal issues. But I've done a ton of presentations. I've also put together a ton of events that involve speakers. Mm-hmm. So I've been on both sides of the microphone, planning, speaking, watching, done it all.
Very cool. Okay, so when you're looking at, so you've put together panels before, like picked out who's on them and contacted people and said, hey, want to do this panel? And I'm sorry, audience, I'm interchanging panel and presentation when they are separate things.
They are separate things. And let's start with that. Yeah. Okay. If you're asked to do a panel discussion, you are sharing the spotlight, and you're also all talking about your own personal experiences. And it's a lot more, you're sitting down behind a table and chatting. Mm-hmm. Kind of.
With me, there was a moderator who'd ask a question, we'd all give a short answer, and then there may be some discussion.
Yeah, something like that. If you're doing a presentation, that's usually you've got a topic, and you're not interacting in that type of way. This is where the death by PowerPoint sometimes come in.
Yeah.
It's closer to, it's not quite a lecture, but I've seen people do lectures as presentations, and it's, you really have a message amongst you and any co-presenters. Mm-hmm. You've got a message that you're trying to get across. And so that's the kind of the focus. A panel, it's more of a discussion. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a themed discussion. A presentation, you've got a message.
Yeah. And a presentation might often just be one person.
Frequently one person. And depending on the size of the audience, there may or may not be discussion with the audience during. There may be a separate Q&A type of thing, but it is really person up front talking to the audience as opposed to possibly talking with panelists. It's a different feel, more than anything.
So I've done one presentation by myself, just on the business of writing, but I've never done a group presentation. So I think we were talking about this. We want to kind of look for strengths of different areas to fill for the presentation.
Yeah. And see, my history is presentation. Mm-hmm. I'm rarely on panels. Mm-hmm. And like we were talking, a lot of times there's one person, but if you're doing multiple, if you're looking for co-presenters, you need to maybe think about strengths or experiences or roles, right? You're gathering an ensemble cast like you would as you're writing your story. Right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And each person has a niche and something they want to fill. Like we were talking about, we need someone with history with the organization. And then we need someone who can really answer questions quickly, right? Someone who's quick on their feet. Yeah. We need someone to maybe be that link between the presenters and the audience In this case, someone who's both a writer and a librarian, or so, or even like this person worked on the first part of a project, and this second person worked on the second part of the project. So again, the presenters, if you're doing co-presenting, they're bringing a little bit different. Hopefully, bringing something a little different than the other people up front.
Right, and it's not like the type you might see at your day job where you've got 3 or 4 people standing there and they just pass the note card to the next person and keep reading the prepared speech. You don't want that either.
That's just a bad presentation to begin with.
Yeah. So speaking of bad presentations,
Oh, yeah.
since that was a lot of our pre-recording lunch, what kind of bad presentations have you seen? Maybe that's not the best way to put it, but
Well,
what kind of mistakes might people make?
that's a nice way of saying it. And some presentations or panels even that have missed the mark. Again, this is coming from my role as an event coordinator, event planner, where it's my event, it's my organization's name on the banner. These are people that I am trying to serve with bringing an event to them. And the author is just a small part of that. And in some of my events, I brought authors in, and not just because they're an author, but because they are a local expert on something. My background in writing is historical fiction, nonfiction history. I had other people who do that type of stuff, and so I wanted them to bring their experience, their research in, and talk about the historical topic, right? And that's how I advertised it. And we had worked out something. It's like, yeah, you can sell your books. We'll do it during the break. But again, the topic that they were supposed to talk about for 50 minutes to an hour was the historical topic. This author, the one I have in mind, spent half an hour pitching her entire backlog of books, leaving 20 minutes to talk about the topic that was advertised.
And that falls into what we talked about a couple weeks ago, your target audience.
Exactly. And in this case, it was completely non-necessary because she already had standing with this group of folks as an author. Though the people, it was another group of libraries, and I bet you every single one of them had at least one of her books in their libraries.
Now, in this author's defense,
Go ahead.
because he or she may not be there to defend themselves.
Absolutely.
Could it be this author just has a prepared speech they give and then gives that speech?
And here's the case: if that's your MO, you need to tell the event coordinator.
Oh yeah.
And see, as an event coordinator, and let me get this clear: the person who I'm talking to, as a person, as an author, as someone who does their research in writing stuff, nothing but respect.
Sure.
Right? I love talking with this person. I'm not bringing them back to an event I plan in the near future because expectations were not met. And it became an infomercial.
Right.
And that goes against what we had agreed on. And so that is a bridge that has been burnt, even though, again, I really respect this person as an author and as a person, great to talk to. I'm never bringing them back to present at one of my events because they broke that expectation. And, there's an audience that they will not have anymore. And I'm not going to suggest this person as a speaker to other people who plan events.
Sure.
Because she does this.
Yeah, you've got to stay on the topic that the program says you're going to stay on.
Right. And so this is something, if you're brought in to do something like this, work with the organizer and lay out those limits that, can I pitch my book? Do I get to sell my book? Am I not supposed to mention anything about my books? Right? Make it very clear between you and the event planner. And before people start thinking, well, this is a personal thing, I mean, the attendees who at that event with their evaluation of the event all complained about that.
Oh,
Because it wasn't the thing they signed up to see either.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just me, and that's why I'm so strongly about this. It wasn't just me, it was the people attending. That's an audience that author may not be able to sell to that easily anymore. So
yeah, there's a difference between author talks and presentations based on a topic.
Yeah, absolutely. For the genre writers, you may not get into the situation, but if you're writing anything with historical, or something that has a strong military, or if you write political thrillers or something, you might get brought in as a subject specialist to give a presentation.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind. And even if you are brought in as a genre person to talk about genre things, work with the person that's inviting you to find out what the expectations are on selling your books, talking about your backlog, talking about your history, how much time you have, and just be respectful and know those expectations. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself locked out of other speaking engagements.
Yeah, very true. Like I said, this is panels again, but
Yeah.
When I've been on a lot of panels, and when they have us introduce ourselves, we say our genre. Not once does the author ever say, they might say, I write books about something, but they don't ever say, go into the plot of their book or anything. So you're not plugging your book at that moment. You're introducing yourself. And then if that kind of similar, I don't know.
Yeah. It's just kind of knowing the expectations of that. And there are going to be cases, both panel and presentation, where you are going to be expected to try to sell your book because that's what they wanted to hear. Yeah. They might be bringing you in to do an author talk about your latest. So that's just not every speaking engagement is an author talk.
Yeah, an author talk, you'll talk about your book, how you wrote your book, what goes on in your book.
Yeah, read excerpts from your book.
Sure. I've seen some good ones, but that's not really what we're talking about.
Well, speaking of talking,
yes,
and going back to panels, there's an etiquette, and we talked about panels a while ago, but I don't know if we touched on this. When you're on the panel, you're sharing that stage with people. And Jason, you had an experience.
Yeah, I've had panels where the moderator talked too much. I think you've had that happen too. I've had some where you're supposed to be on a time limit, but the moderator didn't really honor that. So you've had some, you have 4 or 5 people on a panel and one author talks nonstop, talks over the other authors, talks over the audience, just talks. That's a bad habit for presentations. Bad habit. I don't know if that's the best way to put it.
It's certainly bad form.
It's bad form. Yeah,
it's bad etiquette.
There's lots of things you shouldn't do if you're on a panel.
And don't get us wrong. If you're someone who can talk about a topic or your books or whatever at length, you need to be focusing on doing solo presentations, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
If your strength is being able to hold an audience for that long, what are you doing messing with 5-minute panel discussions? It's like someone who writes epic fantasy deciding all I'm going to write from now on are short stories. Right? Go to your strengths.
Yeah.
We talk about writing to your strengths, present to your strengths.
Yeah, that is good advice. I kind of like the panel format, but I also like the presentation format. So I don't know. I like just doing stuff.
Yeah. Well, for me, I prefer a presentation style, but then again, I also like doing solo because then I can control the flow of how much discussion is coming towards me from the audience.
Oh, yeah.
Because I do it during, unless it's a huge crowd. But if it's a smaller crowd, we're discussing things, me and the crowd, and I'm just kind of guiding them through what I want to do. But that's my style, and it does not work if I'm with another person who is a lecturist, right?
Sure.
And they go through the whole thing, they go through their script, and then there's Q&A. Not saying either way is bad, but
right, it's whatever works for you.
It's like a discovery writer versus an outliner, different styles, different methods. Not saying one is wrong, but again, let's getting back to etiquette, right?
Oh, sure.
We were talking about sharing the panel. Let's talk a little bit more about that moderator. You mentioned it a little bit ago.
Yeah, the moderator should be able to reel in the person. Okay, let's move on. And yeah, it's like you said at lunch too, that you've seen moderators who just like to hear themselves talk too much sometimes, and that's bad. I think to me, a moderator at a panel should really ask the question and keep the time, or keep you on schedule, and that should be all they should do. I don't think they should really be spouting out their opinion unless they're part of the panel.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Are you a moderator? Or are you a panelist?
Yeah.
And
No,
for me,
I've been both, or I've been on panels where I was the moderator, and in that case did a terrible job moderating.
yeah, and see, that's why I think there should be a strict distinction between the person running the panel and concerned about timing versus someone who's there to be part of that open discussion. And so the people who do that and put a panelist in as also the moderator, for me, they're setting up that person for failure.
Yeah, you can't do two jobs at once in that case.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I failed at it. I shouldn't say failed. I wasn't a great moderator because I was paying attention to what the other writers were saying and how I was going to respond, and I wasn't paying attention to whose turn it is to talk or how long they need to talk.
But then as a panelist, you were probably always had something in the back of your head watching the
Oh, yeah.
too. It's like,
yeah.
you're split.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I was in an audience, and we had 3 people up front in the panel. It's like, these are the people we need to hear from. And we spent, I want to say, 3/4 of the time listening to the moderator give opinions about every statement from every panelist. And length. It wasn't even just a quick, well, that's very interesting, or wow, we never heard of that. No time for Q&A because the moderator didn't get through their list of questions because they were talking so much. And also, this is another thing. If you are asked to be an interviewer, you are interviewing someone else to get their information. You are not there to tell the person you're interviewing about their work.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen this case where someone is being interviewed by another author or someone, and the interviewer is doing all the talking.
Okay.
Bad form.
Yeah.
Again, it's like, it's even if it's like your YouTube show or whatever, right? It's the interviewer's name on the product, but you're bringing in these guests, and you're bringing them in to hear their information, their point of view, talk about them. And so that's related to that moderator issue. If you're ever in that case where you have to act as an interviewer, and sometimes they do that, they'll bring someone in to act as an interviewer for a special guest. Let the guest talk.
Yeah.
And pitch in if there's dead space.
Yeah. All good advice. And speaking of dead space, we're at a good time to stop. But before we wrap things up, do you have any other closing thoughts?
Well, before we say we're out of time, that brings up, make sure you know how much time you are given to speak, especially if you're a solo presenter and don't have a moderator or anything. I've been at events where the presenter ends up going like half an hour late. And what that does is it backs up the whole schedule.
Oh,
Now, granted, there should be an event coordinator who pulls the plug on you when it's time. But it's good form as a presenter, as a moderator, to end the session on time. Because there's other folks in the back. You may have to change the setup. If you're doing any type of AV, the next speaker has to get mic'd up perhaps, or bring in their props or their slideshow. And so if you're running over time, the person next to you is going to think you're a real jerk. And if you have a habit of this, you're going to find yourself not invited to present in other places.
Oh, yeah. Because you never know if somebody, or if you're at an event that has multiple presentations taking place at the same time, people are going to want to be on time for their next speech and things like that. So yeah, it's really, I think it's really rude to go long.
Yeah. If you're in one of those events, you are a cog in that machine.
Yeah.
And if you start backing up that machine, you're not going to get invited back.
Yeah.
And as an author, you might also lose some sales because someone will say, well, that's an author, but what a jerk.
Yeah.
I'm not going to support this guy because he has no respect for my time.
Right. Or the other presenter's time. So,
Or the other presenter's time.
So don't go long ever.
And with that, we should wrap up.
Okay, we'll wrap up. So if you'd like to support us, check us out at patreon.com/writegoodbooks and visit us on the web at writegoodbooks.com/podcast. We'll see ya.
See ya.